The news of spousal abuse, particularly women that are being abused in their marriages, some leading to their unfortunate and timely death, has dominated the media in the last 2 weeks. What exactly is happening? Today, on The Law, we find out what the law does to the issue of spousal abuse and what support victims can get. I'm Samson Ladi Anyenini. Welcome to The Law. This is your legal light and health law. You're welcome back. The stories of two women losing their lives to abuse in their relationships caused a stir last week. The late Lillian Dijo and Yesoto Elizabeth Apalu, their husband, whose husband and boyfriend respectively assaulted them, leading to their death. Human rights reporters, Ghana, upon hearing the news, described domestic violence as a pandemic that needed to be condemned and perpetrators prosecuted. So, to highlight this canker, here is a video enacted by Dofsu to educate people on domestic violence. Welcome back. You may have seen this video, but if you have watched it again this afternoon, this is what is some people's reality. Think about it. My guest this afternoon to discuss our topic, spousal abuse, the law, and victim support, are Nanaya Intua Sari. She's member Coalition for Survivors of Domestic Violence, and Irene Abochi Nyahi. She is Director, Legal Assistance Network Ghana, and Executive Member, FIDA Ghana. She's also a convener of the Coalition for Survivors of Domestic Violence. Ladies, good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Mrs. Nyahi.
I'm sure we are all...
Okay, so if you can unmute Irene so that we can hear you. Okay, so we have just a little problem with Irene's connection, and we'll sort it out and bring her to you right now. Now, if you're watching, if you are listening to us, however you are connecting with us, send us your messages. Send us your views. We'll open the phone lines later for you to join and tell us your experience or what you think can be done to overcome the problem of domestic violence, as has been declared as a pandemic. Mrs. Irene Abochi Nyahi, thank you very much for joining us. Good afternoon. Yes, Irene, can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Hello?
Yes, good afternoon.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you clearly. Good afternoon.
Samson, can you hear me?
I can hear you very clearly. All right, we'll sort this out. Okay, so Nanaya, let's first take a look at this video. And there's something I see which you discover appears to be a common trend in domestic violence. That the perpetrators are not people who spring surprises on the victims. They are known to do this and the victims often, particularly in a marriage, are known to have accommodated them for a very long time. Until, in the example we just saw, you know, she was killed. Why does it happen that way?
Samson, thank you for having me as well. One of the things I've realized with time is that at a point, the victims, or better put, the survivors, get used to the abuse. If it's something that the perpetrator has been doing it for a very long time, then they get used to it. Sometimes to self-blame, guilt, or the fact that the person is just afraid to leave. And you see, abuse gets to take, it gets to have an effect on the victim psychologically, physically, emotionally, and all that. So if you are looking at this in this perspective, why she wouldn't leave, sometimes the victim also loves the perpetrator. The victim loves the abuser to the point that he or she tells, in this case so she tells herself that he will change. But what happens is that that person doesn't change. There are times that the abuser would rather claim that it's the victim who makes him do what he does.
Okay.
And at a point, it becomes very difficult for the victim to self-blame. That is when we get to talk about the self-blame. It becomes very difficult for the victim to accept the fact of even her self-worth. Hence, the decision to stay back, not to even report it.
Yeah.
And sometimes too, victims don't report because of the stigma that comes with it. Now, stigma in respect to perhaps the victim has a mother who has been in an abusive home or in an abusive marriage for a long time, and it's normal for the mother. So if she should go back, what the mother would tell her is that your father used to do worse than that, and I stayed because of you, so stay and make yours work. So it looks like there's no support as well if a victim should decide to come out of the situation. And those are the things that we should, as a people, as a society, we should sit and look at.
Let's get Irene's perspective on this. Irene, you have also been doing a lot of work in this area, in gender advocacy, supporting girls. You have on your own taking up issues and ensure that perpetrators of violence against women and girls have been prosecuted in the courts of Ghana. What would you say account for situations where the victims, particularly women, stay in the abusive relationship until it's probably perhaps too late?
It's a very sad situation, and let me use this platform to express my condolences to the families that have lost their loved ones. As a society, we have placed so much value on marriage, such that, just as my sister said, you are supposed to endure and stay in it. If the marriage doesn't work, you are seen as a failure. You couldn't make it work. So you are expected to endure all kinds of abuses. And unfortunately for us, family members and parents are not helping. If you report abuse, they'll ask you to go back and try to make the marriage work. Our gender and stereotypes and gender norms are also worsening the situation. The reason why you see women being at the receiving end all the time is that they are expected to play certain roles, and men are also always acting entitled to be worshipped. Excuse my language, that's the only one I have now. They are expecting the woman to play certain roles, get up early in the morning, go and clean, go and sweep, wash his clothes, do all kinds of things. So when you happen to find yourself in a situation where your expectations or the man's expectations are not you are not meeting the man's expectation, then you become a subject of abuse. And sometimes the abusers are very good at it. They don't start immediately. They show very simple, not violent acts. For example, they appear to be very dominating, very controlling. And in the early stages, you think that is love. He doesn't want me to go there because he loves me. No, those are signs of potential abusers. And they start gradually. And when they get tired of the verbal abuse, they start going physical. So when you are dating a man and you can see that the man or the woman, we are talking about spouses. So if we say spouses, either a man or a woman, women abuse men, men abuse women. But it's only that the women are at the receiving end most of the time. So when you are dating a man and you see a pattern of behavior that looks like he is controlling, he's dominating, he doesn't want you to have your individuality and also achieve your aims in life, that is a red flag that you should be worried about.
How bad is the situation in the country?
Your family members are not going to die, you will die. So take up the responsibility and take control of your life.
How bad is the situation in Ghana?
Yes, about out of 5 women, 3 are assaulted on daily basis.
Really?
And a report from the Human Rights Advocacy Watch also revealed that about 53 women are killed in Ghana, were killed in Ghana in the year 2013. And 2 die monthly. When I read that, I was shocked. So it appears that a lot of reports are not getting to the media. So the statistics are very frightening. You may never, or nobody, no man or woman gets up, or many men will get up and say, today I'm coming to kill my wife. No, that is not what happens. Okay. It is the pattern, gradually, and they become severe. Okay. If you look at the video that you watched.
Ms. Abochenya, hey, hold on briefly for me. Nanaya, have you been aware of this statistic as she shares with us? And what does it tell you? I'm getting shocked getting to learn of that.
Well, I equally am. What I actually am privy to is the stats on the fact that there are some women who already have been in as their childhood. 3 out of 6 or so, 4 women will be who are being abused or who are victims. So out of 6 numbers, 4 women probably would have been abused or would have witnessed abuse as children. And so when they grow up, there's a high probability that they would, out of the 6, 4 women would be victims to abuse. For that I know, and with this I'm equally shocked. So it means that there's a daily occurrence of abuse when it comes to especially in the case of women. Yes, like she said, men are equally abused, just that they don't come out as they should.
But in the case of men, mostly is psychological, emotional.
Yes, emotional,
not physical.
There are some too that if the perpetrator is a female, what actually happens is that if the man is presumably stronger than she is, then she may attack when he's asleep. So she probably will attack in his point of weakness when he's asleep. That he knows he can really attack him physically. And so for men, it comes in the form of insult. It comes in the form of
denial
in respect to sexual pleasure, and all that. And when it comes to them, most of them also stay because of their children. It's a bit difficult for men to have custody of their children, even if the wife is abusive, or even if the partner, for those who are cohabiting. So it's a bit difficult to really touch on the issue of men since they don't report. And they should equally know that there's help, so they should come out.
Right.
Yeah.
Ms. Abochenya, go over that statistic again. I want it to stick before we proceed to look at this issue in more detail.
Yes, as I said, 2 out of 5 women are assaulted on daily basis. And in the year 2012, 53 women were killed as a result of spousal abuse. And depending upon the organization doing the research, it varies. But on the average, women are dying in their marriages. So it is not a subject that we should take lightly. Most of the abuse are not reported. And some of the deaths may appear to look like it's a normal thing that has happened. So we should take this subject very seriously and encourage marriage partners to report abuses. Now, one of the assurances that we can give the public is that the moment you report your husband to the police, it doesn't mean that the man is going to be thrown into jail as they make it appear. There are opportunities of counseling and other things at the police station. Sometimes it is just good for you to have a record or to show that you are going through some form of abuse. Just as my sister said, the abuse takes various forms: psychological, emotional, sexual, verbal, and what have you. Now, when you start seeing the pattern, start thinking of finding solution. Because one day, just one day, our sister that lost her life, we saw where she was alive. She even recorded a video of one of the abuses. She will never believe that the next one is going to end her life. That is why we need to take steps or speak to somebody or call for help. Because, as I said, nobody will wake up and say, I'm going to kill my wife. No, it is something that the person will do that will result in your death, which will be too late at the time. Wow. So the reality on the ground is that women are dying in their marriages as a result of the abuse. Okay. So we need to encourage them to report, and families should support whenever they decide to take steps or end the marriage.
All right. So the pictures you are seeing in your shot belong to Lillian, who unfortunately, died. And she was showing these pictures of her abuse, that's before her death. And this one too is a Akachi North YEA Deputy Director who was alleged to have beaten the girlfriend to death. That's Elizabeth. So that's what you're seeing. Do you get a sense that there is a rise in the incidence of domestic abuse, if you like call it spousal abuse, even though, like the example we just shown, it is a girlfriend and boyfriend relationship? Do you get the view, the idea that it's on a rise? Because suddenly we are all talking about it.
Yeah. I think particularly during this lockdown, globally, we witnessed a huge rise when it comes to domestic violence. And Ghana wasn't spared either. There really is a rise, and that should tell us that there's a need as a society to set up, to let go of certain norms that directly or indirectly is killing us. We shouldn't think that Lillian is gone or another person is gone, so that ends there. I think even during lockdown, we witnessed one supposed pastor who had killed his wife, whom they had even divorced. And so it's really on the rise in Ghana as well.
That was the situation in the US, right?
Yes.
But they are Ghanaians.
They are Ghanaians.
Right.
And so it's something that when we hear it, we should be saddened by it, because it's very heartbreaking when we hear it.
And what we were talking about earlier, in the incident you referred to that happened in the US, the family of the lady disclosed that they had actually been urging her to quit the relationship, but she didn't.
And you probably could look at it from the angle where I talked about the fact that sometimes the victim also loves the perpetrator to the point of death, and so it becomes difficult for them to leave. Now, if you look at that very situation, the man is a supposed man of God, and so perhaps she is the Osofumami, and so it's a bit difficult for the Osofumami to say that I've divorced my husband. But perhaps with the insistent urging of the family, which clearly depicts a supportive family, with that insistent urging, that probably led her to leave the relationship, which still ended up with her being killed at the end. So it's a very dicey situation, and it's a serious one as well.
Right. Now, you're still here on the law, and we're talking about spousal abuse, the law, and victim support. Our major interest is victim support. What are the systems that are available that can provide some support to victims? Now, Mr. Abochinya, you were talking about the various forms in which the violence is manifested. Can you highlight that a lot more so that those who are watching us this moment can take the lessons and look for the signs?
Yes, thank you. If you look at Section 1 of our Domestic Violence Act, Act 732, you will see the various forms that abuse can take. The very popular one that we are all aware of is the physical abuse, where one party will either slap, kick, stamp, push, or physically attack the other party. We also have verbal abuse, where you are insulted, degraded, minimized, and reduced to the extent that you don't value yourself or see any value in yourself. And the psychological abuse can also take different forms, also trying to minimize you, trying to make you feel you're not important and your self-worth is gone. You can cook for your husband, he will refuse to eat. It's a form of psychological abuse. Or when he touches the food, he will quickly have to react and make you feel like you don't know how to cook. He will refuse to take your call or speak to you in the house, ignore you totally. The person hasn't physically touched you, but he's behaving in a way that is sometimes even worse than the physical abuse. He's making he's making your life so miserable, and you are so traumatized in the process. That is also a form of psychological abuse. We also have sexual abuse, where people are taken through certain sexual positions that, when at the time of the marriage, they did not envisage. Those are some of the forms of sexual encounters they will have. And the moment you react, you're either beaten, thrown out, or locked out of the house. So we have physical, we have emotional, we have verbal, we have sexual and psychological, among others. So let me just generalize by saying that any behavior that attempts to reduce you, minimize you, or take away your self-worth, or make you feel or dehumanizes you is abuse.
We were told by the release that was made by ALWA, that is the African Women Lawyers, that there was a rise globally in cases of abuse from 25% to 300% during COVID-19 lockdown, which left families no option than to stay together for days, and Ghana was not spared. That being the case, you will find that all the women's groups and all those who were concerned and issued statements on the back of Lillian's death, including FIDA, sought to advocate for a speedy process to provide for shelter for victims. how important is shelter, availability of shelter for victims, one of the ways to avoid the prevalence of spousal abuse?
Thank you very much for bringing up the issue of shelter. I can tell you that majority of the people that are still in abusive relationships, they are there because they don't know where they will lay their head when they get out of the abuser's environment. So shelter is very crucial to administration of justice in this country. Now, there isn't any ultra-modern property big enough to accommodate victims, especially looking at the statistics that you have just read. If the abuse is increasing, and during the COVID-19 era, it skyrocketed. Imagine all those people. And remember that when they run to their families, they are told to go back home. But if they have a neutral ground where they can seek refuge, I am very sure that a lot of them will run there. Some of them do not even want their family members to know that they are being abused. So if they have a neutral space that they can go and occupy for some time and then think through their life and know the next step to take, that will be amazing, and that will help and reduce the abuse. So shelters are very important.
Okay.
For now, it is the Art Foundation that has a shelter. It's a private shelter. We are also happy that the domestic violence and a victim support unit is putting up a shelter, and kudos to Chief Superintendent Owusua. They are putting up a shelter, and then we have also heard about another shelter, which is the Pearl Heaven. So we are happy that nowadays some of the shelters are emerging, and then we are encouraging government to put this as a priority, to create shelter for victims or for survivors of violence. That will help to solve, a greater part of it.
All right.
So for now, we don't have as many as we wish we could have.
All right. Now,
we still have some shelters available as we speak.
Okay. Now she mentioned the Domestic Violence Act, which clearly provides for a fund. And you can understand why the law provides for a fund. Even though the law provided for a fund, we didn't establish that fund. It took Martin Pebu to go to the High Court, fight it to compel the government to set up the fund. Eventually, when the fund was set up, the last time I checked, that was sometime late last year, the fund had not generated beyond 30,000 Ghana cedis in it. Look at the law and the avenues to give support, and then tell us the role of shelter to minimizing the abuse.
Okay. Now, actually, when it comes to abuse or domestic violence, it's very expensive. It's very expensive because when it comes to victims, they need all the support they could have to go back to their normalcy or go back to being normal again. Because when we look at we have the laws. I think what I've realized and noticed with Ghana is that we have the laws, but it's with the implementations. And that's one of the things we should really as well sit and look at. Now, when it comes to shelters, shelters are supposed to provide the basic living things for a victim. If a victim should find him or herself in a shelter, then the shelter should be able to take care of the victim in that regard. And most of the times, shelters are able to refer victims or survivors to other services as well that will help them in respect to their mental health, in respect to their health in general, counseling, legal help, and all that. And the government is to me doing what probably they could be doing, but what they should look at now is to how best to channel finances or resources into the funds accounts that they created. They have the good intentions and all that, but until it's implemented, it's not done, because abuse is still ongoing. And when it comes to shelters, it's one thing running it. It's money. That's why I mentioned that domestic violence is expensive. And so just imagine that when Lawyer Irene mentioned the shelters, the private ones are many. While the government
it's now trying to get some. And so you should, the private ones equally need all the resources they could probably have to be able to help. When women or when victims go into shelters, they are supposed to be trained as well, aside receiving financial advices and education and all that. There's supposed to be some sort of skill training as well, so that when it comes to victims, it's difficult for some of them to leave because of financial headaches. When I leave, what am I going to feed my children with? How am I going to fund my children's school fees and all that? And so it becomes difficult. We had spoken about the situation where there is the fear, the scare not to leave the relationship or not to even separate, because you don't have any place to go.
Exactly.
If a woman went back to the family, they would say, go back to your husband's home. So it means that shelters are important to provide, that kind of help within that gap. So one is able to say, because there is shelter, I can separate, at least for a while, to see how I can get counseling and I can get support until I make a decision whether I should go back here or I shouldn't. So, Irene, what would you say should be our priority when it comes to providing shelters, which we don't have in the manner that you expect?
I will say that the government should create a very big shelter at the this space. What's the name? The cathedral. Where that space? Have you seen the cathedral space? If they can go place it to shelter, that will be amazing. Because that is that space. We need that space for shelters, so that 51% of Ghanaians are women. So when it comes to abuse, the majority of the population, they are going through one form of abuse or the other. So can you imagine 51% of the population, majority of that will need shelters. We are not saying that we should break down homes, but we want to find solutions to problems. Now, now the new strategy that we are adopting for shelters is to make it a one-stop shop. Some people are abused because they don't have any proper skills to generate money, because they just jump into the marriage. But the type of shelter that we are developing now, it is going to provide you with skills, just as my sister said. There will be doctors there. We are creating a court within that space, so that the victim doesn't move from one place to the other. You first report to the police station. The police will say, go to the hospital. Sometimes there's money to spend between the police station to the hospital you don't have, but you have to find money, go to the police station, go to the hospital. From the hospital, you'll be asked to go and go to legal aid. And the victim is being re-victimized by sending the person round, and they get tired. That is why you don't see a lot of prosecution of abusers. And that is one aspect that we need to talk about. Because of the obstacles to justice, victims are unable to go through all the rigorous means of assessing justice. So most of them give up on the way.
We talk
and
about...
when they give up, the abusers go scot-free. So now we are trying to cut off all the labor that comes with it, so that every service, counseling, legal, police, hospital, whatever, will be located within one's space,
right,
so that the abuser will be encouraged. There will be counselors as well.
Right.
And that is a project
so
that
as the two of you talk,
coming up with.
As the two of you talk,
support her and encourage her.
As the two of you talk, I hear about the things that are ingrained in our culture, in our socialization. If a typical Ghanaian home will not welcome a daughter back home who is complaining about abuse in their marriage or their relationship, there must be something behind that. I look at our matrimonial causes law, for example, where it says that if you are married, the time you can present a divorce is not until the marriage has done a journey of 2 years. Until 2 years in the marriage, you can present a divorce or a petition for divorce. Yes, there are exceptions. But do you find that our law also sort of is also complicit in this culture that doesn't help the situation?
Yes, let me even worsen the situation by adding that even if matures to the stage of dissolution after the 2 years, you have to show that your family members or your pastors or some well-meaning Ghanaians have tried to resolve the problem and they were unable to resolve the problem. So then that it matures then into dissolution, or you can then apply. When you apply, you have to convince the courts that the attempts were made to, solve the problem and they were unsuccessful.
And that the marriage has broken down beyond reconciliation. It has irretrievably broken down.
Yes. Just as you said, the courts, just like the principles we have in the Bible, which most of the pastors and religious organizations are also using to push back the abusers into the marriage, the courts, as well as the religious stance, do not encourage divorce, because they said, God said, I hate divorce. And that has also dovetailed into our legal jurisprudence, where the courts are encouraged to put families together. But we have to remember that that attitude towards putting families or refusing to dissolve marriage anyhow doesn't mean that when there is abuse, you should stay in it. Mm-hmm. That is why there are exceptions to that rule. If you can demonstrate to the court that you are going through a life-threatening situation, you don't have to wait for the 2 years to for the marriage to get to 2 years before you file for the divorce.
All right.
You can apply to the court to convince the court that my life is at stake and I don't need to stay in this marriage. If the court agrees with you, then you can file the divorce within less than 2 years.
Okay. Sometimes it's not a divorce that you really need. You may need a separation. How do you go about that?
Yes, unfortunately for us, we don't have separation in Ghana. So I'm happy you are coming up with that idea. We don't have separation in Ghana. You're either married or you are divorced. There's no legal separation in Ghana. Whoever separates is just physically moving him or himself away from the marriage. But elsewhere, you can apply for legal separation. But Ghana, we don't have legal separation. You are either married or you're divorced.
Okay.
But so some people physically just move away to have their peace.
All right.
But there's good news when the person moves away.
Right.
In section 3.4, the moment there is cause for complaint of abuse under the Domestic Violence Act, the moment there's a cause of abuse and the person moves away, the law is that the other spouse is not allowed to go near the residence or go into the house where the other party is living unless there's an express permission on the part of the other person to welcome you to wherever she has gone to before you go to that person. Okay. It's just to prevent the abuse. So as for the Domestic Violence Act, it is very rich.
Okay.
With rules.
Nanaya, what do you have to say in addition to what Mrs. Aboche-Nyahe is saying about these ingrained issues of culture, religion, and even some aspects of the law that have become more of a hindrance than a support to avoid the abuse?
Okay, so as a layperson, in respect to law, as a layperson, I think that is man that made law. The law didn't make man.
Right.
And so if in our own, with our own intuition and we've been able to come up with laws, then of course there should be room for amendment. If we get to realize that this is not serving the purpose with which we want it to serve, we definitely should amend it. And so to me, it's whichever law, whichever section of the law needs to be amended to suit our generation, to suit the current situation. Else, it will still continue to.
We are taking your calls and contributions from this point on. But Naya, can you tell if someone sought advice as to how to separate nicely at a time when they are undergoing an abuse and they don't want to be drastic about saying, oh, I've gone through one or two, incidents of abuse and I think it's enough to just get out of the marriage, but rather they want to separate and seek counseling and see how things can be done. What sort of advice will you give in that direction?
Okay, so one of the things that we should, as a society, we should all try to do, not only with those who are in abusive homes or environments. If you are a friend of a victim, then you should be ready to support. As a family, you should be ready to support. Now, if you are a victim, you should have a plan ready. Those are the things that we should look at. You should have a plan ready at any point in time to leave. And with your plan, you can decide that you make use of an emergency bag. With an emergency bag, it could probably, if your home is small, perhaps you are living in a 2-bedroom apartment and whichever is in the house is visible to the abuser, you can probably decide that, okay, so I'm keeping these kind of stuff in my friend's home or even at work. Hide it in a place that the moment you run, and then if you have a car, you have access to a car. Almost all the time, depending on how secure the environment is, leave the driver's door open so that and then get a spare key ready to run. And with the kind of bag, the kind of content that should be in the escape bag should be your documents, very needed documents. Your passports should be in there, your ID cards should be in there, your licenses should be in there, so that the moment you run, you don't have to come back unless you know you are ready. And
okay,
yeah.
Grace is calling us from Dansuman. Hello, Grace.
Afternoon, sir. Hello.
Grace, let's listen to you.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please, I have a daughter who is in a similar problem. Anytime there is their rent paying up, the man will run to his parents. He will not settle it. But when my daughter goes to find money to pay for the rent, he comes back. And now we go to the pastor for the parents. They don't even want to see my daughter in the house. Now the guy is sitting in chair to sleep in his father's house. So I don't know what to do. And today, my husband and my daughter are even going to the pastor again.
Just hold on for a second.
No.
Let's have Irene make a comment, or if you have some advice directly to Grace, what would you say?
Yes, under the Domestic Violence Act, her daughter can apply for protection. That application will demand that the perpetrator is ordered to pay the rent of the party. See, when we have laws, but if you don't apply for them, you cannot benefit from it because it is purely an abuse. They are supposed to live together, survive together, and then raise family together. So if, as a responsible husband, you are, indirectly abusing your wife, or even directly, the other party can apply to the courts under the protection orders. Under the protection orders, we have a lot of protection under part, and I wish that we could just even go into them one after the other, what the victim can do or the survivor can do.
Okay.
The protection that is there between section 17 to 20, you can apply for, if the person is even violent, you can apply to restrain the person from coming within 50 meters. If it is about rent, the court can also order the perpetrator to pay that rent. Even if it comes to a point where you have applied for occupation orders. Occupation orders remove the perpetrator from the environment. So even if it is his own house or it is the matrimonial home, and you are able to procure an occupation order that orders the perpetrator out of the environment, even if he is the one supposed to pay the rent, he will still be ordered out of the environment and he will still be paying the rent. So the protection orders in the Domestic Violence Act, they are a lot.
Okay, all right.
Form of abuse can be taken care of, provided you can apply for that protection from the court.
So, Ms. Abochenya, normally when the issue is about court, people are thinking money, and we can't afford and all of that. In this circumstance where it is about the Domestic Violence Act, does it mean that they simply need to make a report to the DOFSU?
Yes. Exactly.
Okay.
Your first step is to make a report to the nearest domestic violence unit.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Giving a form to go.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Or the government hospital.
Thank you very much, and thank you for calling, Grace. If all attempts by family, pastors, and as you suggest, it's not actually yielding much fruit, you may want to elevate it to the state level where you may get an assistance. Hello, Echo.
Good evening.
Echo, you are calling from where in Kumasi?
I'm calling from Kote in Kumasi.
Okay, let's hear you, Echo.
Yes, I want to contribute, but I want to believe that I've listened from the beginning, but it looks as if the concentration is on women, and also it looks as if most of the women we're talking about are those who are not financially sound. But I have a situation where this woman is financially sound, and because of her financial capacity, is abusing the man to the extent that he provokes the man every day to the extent that he has to go out with another man, and the man finds out, and the man inquires. She has to raise cutlass on the man, and when the man overpowered her and gave her some slaps, she ran to police station to make the case. And being a woman, the police believe that yes, the woman is right, the man has abused the woman, and they assist the woman to pack from her matrimonial home. All effort by the man and people have made to get the woman back home, and the woman is not coming. In this case, how do you put it? Is it an abuse, or the woman intentionally caused that? And it's even threatening the man that whatever property he has, he makes sure they sell the property so that the woman go back to zero, because now she has financial muscle.
All right, thank you very much, Eko. When it comes to the aspect of the property, don't take empty threats. Property is made by named people. So if it's a house, it will clearly have been built by a specific person or jointly by the couple. Therefore, one person doesn't have the right to take it from the other. Normally, the women are the weaker in these matters, but we now have a law that is clear that the joint property, one person cannot deal with it by wanting to sell it or mortgage it without the written consent of the other party. So that place, let's be assured that there's no cause for alarm. What can you say to Echo? And Echo must know we are focusing on women for good reason. Yes, they mentioned and paid attention to men as well, but we know what the situation really is. It's about the women who are enduring and suffering the brunt here. Okay. Okay,
so 1 out of 3 men are abused in respect to statistics. And with these, I mentioned from the beginning that it's actually difficult for them to come out because of the fact that sometimes they are not believed, like in the situation of Echo, they are not believed because he is a man. It becomes, that is one of the challenges that comes with being a man who is a victim to abuse. That is really a challenge. And I think that as a society, we should be open-minded. We shouldn't look at, yes, women are in the majority and are suffering, and children, but then we shouldn't look at it from only the perspective of women.
All right. 1
out of 3 is still a number that we should still look at, so that in the end the society becomes healthy.
Ms. Abochinya, what would you say to a call?
Yes, women abusers are also there. That is a fact. There are women that abuse men. And maybe he wasn't listening from the beginning. You said it clearly, that most of them are abused psychologically. And maybe because of natural dispositions, men are stronger, some men, than women. That when we also refer to spouse, we mean either a man or a woman. So you will hear us mention women, not because men are not important, but because according to the statistics, women suffer more abuses than men.
Right.
But
and
the advice also abuse men.
Right.
In
and
fact,
the advice you gave to Grace applies to a call's friend as well, because the law is gender neutral. You wanted to take us through the law and the various protections available. Maybe you should do that now. Beatrice Donko Kobina says, women stay in an abusive marriage in the name of their children, but later die, leaving the very children they are protecting miserable. So let's go on with the list that you wanted to talk about in the next 3 minutes.
Well, then let's just say that under the Domestic Violence Act, when you report the abuser and you successfully follow through, and the perpetrator is convicted, he can spend about 2 years in prison. He can also, or she can also be fined. The perpetrator can also be ordered to compensate the survivor, or an order can be made for the perpetrator to, to imprison the perpetrator, fine the perpetrator as well, and ask him to compensate. So abuse has been taken care of in our law, so it shouldn't be taken for granted. We will encourage victims to follow through, so that if the statistics of prosecution goes up, maybe it will prevent perpetrators or other accused persons from perpetrating this violence that is destroying our social fiber. Children are not having peaceful home, and it will eventually affect the developmental goals of the country. Now, the protections that we have under the Domestic Violence Act, as I said, the person can be born to be of good behavior. The person can be restrained from coming within 50 meters of the survivor. The person can be ordered to take care of the home, because some of the reason why the victims are not able to report is that, when I go, the man will not take care of the children, or the children's school fees. You will hear that repeatedly. Please, the information is that the perpetrator can be ordered to pay the children's school fees. He can be ordered to pay the rent. He can be ordered to pay all the things that he's supposed to do. So reporting a violent person or reporting an abuser doesn't mean that the children will not eat, they will not go to school, or they will not be taken care of. They can be taken care of. So you can also report the abuse.
Thank you very much.
Now hold on. There's also another protection.
Just
even
hold on.
Mortgage property.
Yeah. Thank you. Nanaya, what will be your advice? We have just some 20 seconds. What will you advise, particularly people who are in it?
Okay, so I remember I read a post on Facebook about a lady who talked about her mother, that the mother didn't leave the abusive environment and ended up being mad. Okay, so sometimes it's not only death, you end up losing your sanity. And she says she's now going through, her siblings are going through therapy. And so sometimes you leave to protect your children, or you stay to put your children, the same children that you are trying to stay for, at risk. So I think that when it comes to victims, they should never take the blame. They should rather decide to do what they have to do, and at a point make sure that their children receive what they are supposed to receive, emotionally and psychologically.
Thank you so very much. As we get to the end, then it becomes even more interesting, and we have enjoyed thoroughly the education that you have given. Mrs. Irene Abochenya, thank you so very much immensely for the legal help that you have provided for many spouses who are listening to you right now and watching right now. Mrs. Irene Abochenya is Director, Legal Assistance Network, Ghana, and Executive Member, FIDA, Ghana. She's also a convener of the Coalition for Survivors of Domestic Violence. Nanaya Ntiwa Asare is member, Coalition for Survivors of Domestic Violence. Thank you all so very much for making time to help us discuss this issue. Now, as you can see on your screens, if you are confused about an issue, share your problem with us for some legal solution. The WhatsApp is on there. You can also send an email to JoyNews@multitvworld.com, or send a WhatsApp, and we will take your issue up and find lawyers who can give you the solution. I'm Samson Ladia Yanini. This has been The Law. It's your legal light and help law. Have a good afternoon.